Good morning, viewers. It's Rob Atfield reporting for Port Carling Boats. It's November 25th, 2015. We're here in Gravenhurst at the shop of Mike Windsor. What you're looking here is a vent that Michael has ingeniously recreated from virtually nothing for his 1916 Minett. I'm going to ask Mike to explain a little bit of how he did this. Go for it, Mike.
Okay. Basically, I wanted to create a vent, and traditionally I would have asked to borrow it, and sometimes people are good enough to let you use it. But the problem with something like a vent, it is hollow. See, it cannot be directly sand cast. Basically, the object has to be removed from the sand. Now, to do this, it requires a core box. Now, it's a little complicated to explain, but I'll do my best. I started off with a photograph of another vent that somebody was good enough to let me photograph, and this is a profile shot, which basically gives me the shape. And I also have the right side, which I photographed, and from this I've basically started off with a profile, and there's the profile I did, and to make sure it matches, this photograph has been scaled so it's in real size in my computer program here. And from here I've got the complete part modeled in my computer program here. This is a 3D representation. I can also shade this to get a better look, and I can check out this surface to make sure it's smooth enough. Now, there are actually two parts here. Now this is where it becomes obvious that you need a core box for a part like this because it's hollow. Now, to do a casting with a core, you need a thing called a core box. Now, this red area here is basically simulating the hollow part. Now, this red part will be in the original positive pattern, which will be put into the sand to make an impression of. And I will also have to make a negative image of this to take to the foundry, and the foundry fellow is going to use a thing called a core box to create this red shape in a negative, in a block of sand, which is basically baked. Now, this block of sand is put into the impression of the original part, and this is what creates the hollow. So I've created basically a model of my part here, the vent, and I've also made the vent base in a separate part. And then over here is basically the shape of the core box. Now, this red area here is what will be filled with sand, the two halves, and that will become a big lump of sand that will form the hollow. Now, from here I go to another program, and this is where it gets interesting. I'm basically generating the tool paths from these are my parts here that I've imported, the positives and the negatives. And from my parts that I'm creating tool paths from, the first one I have to do is rough it out for the positive. It's two halves because a 3D router, I can only do two halves, you can't do undercuts. So I'm going to simulate this tool path to make sure everything looks okay before I basically turn the machine loose on an expensive piece of mahogany. And now I'm going to do the finishing tool path, simulate that. And I can also do the core boxes here. Here's the core box roughing tool path. I figured while I have the piece of wood clamped down on the CNC router, I might as well do everything at once. So I'll simulate that tool path. Now, these are pretty big cuts that I'm roughing it out with, and then when I want the final finish, I go to the finishing tool path, which are the router movements are represented by these blue lines, which are very close together, and it leaves a much finer finish. Now, you notice here I've also made indexing holes in the pattern, and this allows me to clamp the two halves together to make sure they line up.
Right.
Now, if we go over to my desk here, which I've semi-cleaned off, I can show you the parts here. This is the pattern, which is going to be put into the sand, and in two halves. The sand will be taken. Two halves of sand will be separated. This part will be taken out, and that will create the cavity. The core box are these two halves here. Now these will go together and they'll be filled with sand, and that's what will create a block of sand. That block of sand will basically rest in the impression here and here, and that's what will fill the hollow, or create the hollow here. This part on here I put on to basically aid in machining when I'm finishing the part. This I actually chucked in the lathe. I put a center in the back, and then it allowed me to turn this face here, which has to be a nice fit in the base.
Right.
And this is an extra one that the fellow at the foundry made. This is what it looks like when it comes back from the foundry. Now this was just used and then cut off before it went to the plater.
Right.
Now the hollow here is basically what was formed by the lump of sand. It's amazing the detail, though. I don't know whether you can get this, but there was couple of little router marks from my tool path that I didn't quite sand out. They're still visible in the casting there. I don't know whether you can see that.
Very precise casting then.
Yeah, just from sand, it's very remarkable how much detail they can get.
And this is brass, Mike, is it?
This is silicone bronze.
Oh, silicone bronze, okay.
Now the other two that I am going to use on the boat, they're the platers now. The plater will be finishing these, and then the other thing now is going
And
to
that's a nickel plate they'll put on that, is it?
this will be chrome plated.
Chrome plate, okay.
On this, originally probably would have been nickel, but I've thought about that, and I realized I'm not a polisher, and my hats go off to anybody who does nickel. I think it looks gorgeous, but it doesn't look gorgeous if you don't polish it every year.
Sure. Well, there you have it, viewers. That's anybody who thinks wooden boat restoration isn't a complex task, come and talk to Mike. You can see the highly technical skill that's required to reproduce one of these metal parts on a classic boat. Thanks for the demo, Mike. Quite amazing and very impressive. Viewers, you know where you can come if you need a metal part refabricated. Over and out.